So it looks like some of these RTX 3000 GPUs are basically discontinued, and that's like the 3080 Ti, 3090, 3090 Ti. What does this mean for buyers and RTX 4000? What about prices? I'm going to tell you some stuff that you may not really know. Now, Nvidia obviously pushes RTX 3000 still, even with the release of 4000, but not these higher end GPUs. I think at retailers, I haven't seen these at Micro Center or even Newegg and different places like that for a very long time, aside from a couple of like leftovers or maybe some open box models. And if you guys like GPU videos, remember to subscribe and smash that like button so we reach 100,000 subscribers before the end of the year. When Nvidia tells us that RTX 3000 is going to live side by side with 4000, they're basically talking about like the 3060, 3060 Ti, 3070, maybe up to the 3070 Ti. Even the 3080 is very difficult to find. I mean, like the 3090, literally impossible. You can't find them new anymore. Very, very difficult. 3090 Ti sold out mostly as well, not really available. So anything under is what Nvidia is going to sell, and that's kind of like what they're using for their mid-range and lower-end mainstream GPUs while they prepare the other GPUs in the 4000 lineup. I mean, they invested all that money and they have the inventory, so it makes sense that they're pushing that. It's a really, business decision, sort of reflecting what's going on with the market and the very highly decreased GPU demand. It's some of the lowest in a very, very long time, partly because of all of the economic issues that are going on. Then, of course, because Ethereum disappeared. That was a huge driving factor, especially for these RTX 3000 GPUs. So they need to get rid of that inventory. So what does this mean for you? I mean, the 4070 Ti is the cheapest Nvidia new generation GPU available currently, with an MSRP of $799, and it performs about as well as a 3090 Ti with less power consumption, with the caveat that it does have a reduced 192-bit memory bus and only 12 gigabytes of VRAM. So if you plan to use this at 4K, and why shouldn't you? I mean, if it's a 3090 Ti level, you would want to possibly do it at 4K, even though Nvidia markets it as like a 1440p, 120 frames per second GPU. It does fine there, really well. But if people are paying $799 for a GPU like this, you would think it should do 4K, right? I mean, even the 3080 could do 4K. So this limited memory bus in some situations, not all, will definitely show a bit of an issue, especially compared to the 3090 Ti, which has a much faster memory bus and 24 gigabytes of VRAM. But that's the GPU that you're dealing with. That is the lowest price for the new generation. Everything else is cheaper. That's why it makes sense that Nvidia eliminated all of the other GPUs above maybe, the 3070 Ti. If you want to get a 4070 Ti, you're definitely going to beat a 3080, you're going to beat a 3080 Ti, and mostly you're going to tie or beat the 3090 Ti, so they don't really have any more purpose in the market. And those GPUs were basically right around the price of, if not a little more in some cases, than the 4070 Ti. The 3070 Ti is still something they can sell for under $600, and that's going to be where you start to have a difference in the tier performance and the price class of the GPU. And then when they release their 4070, they may further start to alienate maybe the 3070 Ti, maybe the older 3070s, and just leave like a 3060, 3060 Ti or something like that until they fully get rid of inventory. And now let's hear a word from our sponsor, VIP-CDKdeals.com, a Windows 10 Pro CD key. Add to cart, you put in code CC20. This will also work on Windows 11. You want to go into your settings in Windows, change and adjust your CD key, click activate, and now let's go back to the video. You have to change your perspective a little bit to really understand what's going on in the GPU market. You have to change your perspective a bit and view it from Nvidia's side. If you view it from our side, the consumer and gamer side, we're going to think, oh, $799 is a terrible value for, a 4070 Ti. There are other better options, maybe cheaper used or anything like that. Nvidia doesn't think like that. They think $799 is where they're going to price it at to make sure they sell the inventory of RTX 3000. And as we can see with them sort of, getting rid of the higher end 3000, they're being pretty successful at that. And they just probably have to run through the 3070 Ti, 3060 Ti, and 3060s. Remember, recently, certain companies even released different versions of like the 3060 Ti and those type of GPUs. Some of them have a little bit different VRAM configuration, but they're still producing them and going through inventory that was already out there. So it might be cheaper for them now after years of them being in production compared to something that's going to be newer, like with the RTX 4000. So that's something to keep in mind. And of course, on the used market, how will this actually affect pricing? Like if you have a 3090 and you're trying to sell it, is it really going to make a big deal if they're not available in retail? I think a little bit it will. I mean, GPU prices started to go down pretty heavily from where they were in 2021, but after something like the 3090 reached a certain low price, maybe like $800 to $900, it didn't move too much from there. Depending on the model you have and what condition it's in, some could go as low as like 700 something, some as high as like 900 if it's a nicer water-cooled one or like an Asus Strix. But in general, they didn't go down to like 600 or 500. They really stayed a little bit higher, and they stabilized because at the same time, Nvidia was sort of manipulating the market for the RTX 3000, meaning that if the store shelves were full of brand new 3090s at, $800 or $900, then nobody would buy a used one for anywhere near that because you can just get a brand new one. But those are basically gone. And if somebody still wants a 3090, they may just have to go to the used market, or else there aren't that many high-end options unless you want to step into the newer 4070 Ti. Therefore, seeing how Nvidia's game plays, it's going to bring those people, make them buy the new GPU, because a lot of people don't like buying used GPUs, even though I think it's fine. Most of the time, you're going to get a very good deal compared to new retail prices that are still high, but that's the reality of the situation. So yes, from retail, if you eliminate the RTX 3000 high-end lineup above the 3080, those GPUs on the secondhand market will still kind of maintain their price because people will still buy them and they're still going to be available. And the next options up aren't really very attractive. I mean, the 4080 at $1,200 is a whole step above the 4070 Ti at $800. So that's a GPU that people are not really willing to pay for right now. And unless you do buy a 4070 Ti, you're going to have to contend with one of these other ones on the used market. So Nvidia is definitely playing a very carefully tuned game from their angle here, which it's not always good for the consumer. I mean, we're stuck with these old GPUs, especially the middle range GPUs, and the higher end stuff. You're kind of being forced to pay more for RTX 4000. In many cases, if you're not going to use ray tracing or DLSS 3.0, you're not really getting all that big of an uplift. Like if you have a 3090 right now, unless you go to like a 4090, you're not really going to see that huge difference. If you did do ray tracing and you do want to do DLSS 3.0, if the games you play support it, maybe the 4080 will give you that uplift. But then at like $1,200, is it really going to be worth that price difference if you get one of the Founders Edition or something like that? Well, if you sold your 4090 for maybe like $700 or $800, you're looking at like at least a $400 to $500 upgrade cost, which, it's not really going to get that big of a difference yet. The 4090 is a different story, but then you're going to be paying at least twice of what you're going to be able to sell your used 3090 for. And even though you will be getting at least twice the performance, they're also going to be a bit difficult to find. And realistically, you may end up paying even more if you have to get one of the models that are like $1,799 or a little more, even if it's not the base $1,599, which are still difficult to find. So this all kind of just makes the GPU market even more confusing, because even though we can break it down and know exactly what's going on, imagine a typical buyer. They're not going to know either. They're just going to go and buy like a 3070 for like $600 retail that's still available, or they're going to go to the next available new GPU, which is the cheapest 4070 Ti at $799. Even though it's a terrible value, that's really what's going to happen, playing exactly into Nvidia's hands. So it's interesting that they no longer carry the upper end of the GPUs, but that just means that they've really gone through that inventory and everybody that wanted to buy them did. And that way they can focus more on the mid range. Maybe in the long run, it's better for us. The faster that they can actually run through RTX 3000 series GPUs that they still have and fully get rid of them and fully release RTX 4000, then they're not going to have a choice but have to lower the price of RTX 4000, because then that's going to be their main GPU and they're not going to have the incentive left over that they have to sell RTX 3000 and therefore price these new GPUs higher. They're going to be able to price them competitively, like where they really should be. 4070 Ti really would be nice at $699 or even $599, but realistically, $699 is probably the best that we can really expect at this point, but that's better than the prices that they are now, with some models going all the way up to $1,049, like that Asus Strix. So that's a huge jump over the $799 base price and a huge jump, almost twice the price of a base 3070 Ti as it was a couple years ago if you bought like a $599 Founders Edition. So a lot to think about here. It's interesting that these GPUs are slowly starting to exit the market. At the end of the day, I think it's going to be better for us as they start to sell out the old stuff, like I said, meaning that new stuff is going to have to be priced cheaper unless they start to push an RTX 5000 a little bit earlier than expected. Then we're going to see the same type of pricing issues as they try to hold 4000 to where they are. But I'm really curious to see if the GPUs not selling on Nvidia's side, like the 4080 and 4070 Ti being heavily in stock, how much that's going to affect their future decisions. I think it's just going to delay any type of new GPU releases, because if they have so many available already, if they release a new one that everybody wants, it's just going to make the sales of the existing one even worse. So in that sense, it's not too good for us when nobody buys these GPUs. It's really going to stagnate the market, and instead of having releases every year or every 2 years, we may start to see 3 or 4 year release cycles as they just take a lot longer to make their way through sales of these older GPUs that nobody is buying. Oddly enough, I feel like sometimes they're more likely to want to do that, just hold the inventory for a very long time, like other companies that do this as well, Apple and Intel, rather than have to discount the price, because then that reduces their shareholder value, reduces the brand visibility. One of the big things Nvidia loves talking about in their quarterly sales is that gamers are paying more on average for GPUs. They love telling this to their shareholders, and the shareholders love hearing this because they're making more money per GPU sold. For us, it's terrible. It's somebody like gloating over the fact that we're paying more for basically the same thing. But for Nvidia, that's great news. So they don't want to tell their investors, oh, we sold a lot more GPUs, but we had to discount heavily. They rather tell the investors, oh, gamers are paying more for GPUs, and not really have to tell them that they're selling less, or just kind of, gloss over that particular issue. So that's something to keep in mind as well. GPUs don't sell. Unfortunately, prices will still stay the same. They're going to hold those price values and hold back and manipulate the market like they're holding back inventory right now of RTX 3000. And then we're just going to wait a long time until we see more innovation as they go through these GPUs. So it's not really the best situation for anybody if you think about it. All right, guys, remember to subscribe, smash that like button, and I'll see you guys on the next video.